Welcome to Mystery at 221B, where Sherlock Holmes' secrets come to life.
In the misty heart of Derbyshire lies Ashbourne Manor, where an ancient labyrinth whispers secrets of love and betrayal. When Clara Ashbourne, a radiant young woman, vanishes into its twisting paths, Sherlock Holmes is summoned to unravel a mystery steeped in shadow. Was she lured to her doom by a hidden truth? Who among the manor's guests, a jealous cousin, a heartbroken fiancé, a charming captain, or a secretive doctor, hides a deadly secret? As the hedges close in, one question haunts: what lies at the heart of the labyrinth, and will Holmes's genius pierce its darkness before it claims another soul? Chapter 1. The Whisper of the Labyrinth. In the autumn of 1895, the quaint village of Ashbourne Hollow, nestled in the misty folds of the Derbyshire countryside, lay under a shroud of uneasy quiet. The air was crisp, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the great house of Ashbourne Manor loomed over the village like a sentinel of forgotten grandeur. Its grey stone walls, weathered by centuries, seemed to hold secrets in every crack and crevice, and its labyrinthine gardens, long untended, whispered of mysteries best left undisturbed. It was here, in this place of shadowed beauty, that the strange events of the Ashbourne affair began to unfold, drawing the attention of Sherlock Holmes, the consulting detective whose singular intellect had already become the stuff of legend. Dr. John Watson, ever the faithful chronicler of Holmes's exploits, sat in the familiar confines of their Baker Street rooms, his pen poised above a fresh page in his notebook. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the cluttered room, where chemical apparatus, violin cases, and stacks of papers vied for space. Holmes, reclining in his armchair, was in one of his contemplative moods, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his sharp grey eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the ceiling. The morning post had brought a letter, its envelope bearing the crest of Ashbourne Manor. And it was this missive that had stirred Holmes from his customary lethargy. "Well, Watson," said Holmes at length, breaking the silence with his precise, measured tones, "what do you make of this curious invitation? A baronet in distress, a labyrinth with a sinister reputation, and a disappearance that defies explanation. It is, I confess, a matter that piques my interest." Watson, who had read the letter earlier, adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat. "It's from Sir Reginald Ashbourne," he replied, "a man of considerable standing, if I recall correctly. His niece, Miss Clara Ashbourne, has vanished under mysterious circumstances, and he begs your assistance. The local constabulary, it seems, are at a loss. But what intrigues me, Holmes, is this talk of a labyrinth. It sounds positively medieval." Holmes's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles. "Medieval it may be, Watson, but the human heart capacity for deceit and desperation. Sir Reginald writes of a family curse, a labyrinth that has claimed lives before, and a gathering of guests who were present when Miss Clara disappeared. It is a puzzle, and I am not one to resist a puzzle. We shall take the afternoon train to Derbyshire. Pack your revolver, Watson. I have a feeling it may prove useful." By late afternoon, the train was rattling through the rolling hills of the Peak District, its windows framing a landscape of rugged beauty. Holmes, his deerstalker hat tilted slightly, gazed out at the passing scenery, though Watson knew his friend's mind was already dissecting the problem at hand. The letter from Sir Reginald had been brief but evocative. Miss Clara, a young woman of 22, known for her beauty and vivacity, had been seen entering the labyrinth at dusk 2 evenings prior. She had not emerged, and no trace of her had been found, despite exhaustive searches by the household and the local police. The labyrinth, an ancient feature of the estate, was said to be haunted by the spirits of those who had perished within its winding paths. A tale Sir Reginald dismissed as superstition, but which had unsettled his guests. Ashbourne Manor, when they arrived, was a study in contrasts. A grand edifice of Jacobean architecture, its towers and gables imposing, yet its windows dark, as if the house itself mourned. The butler, a stooped man named Grayson, greeted them with a deference tinged with anxiety. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing-room, gentlemen," he said, leading them through a hall adorned with portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes, their eyes seeming to follow the visitors. The drawing-room was a cavernous space, its walls lined with oak paneling and its air thick with the scent of old books and wax polish. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, a man of perhaps 60, rose to greet them. His face was lined with worry, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled slightly as he clasped Holmes's in greeting. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I cannot thank you enough for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "This is a calamity, a nightmare. Clara, my niece, my ward, she is gone, and I fear the worst." Holmes, ever composed, motioned for Sir Reginald to sit. "Pray, sir, begin at the beginning," he said, taking a seat and crossing one leg over the other. "Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem. The truth lies in the particulars." Sir Reginald recounted the events of the past 2 days. A house party had been convened at the manor, a gathering of family and friends to celebrate Clara's engagement to Mr. Edward Langley, attended the Ashbournes for years. On the evening of Clara's disappearance, the party had dined together, and Clara, in high spirits, had proposed a game. She would enter the labyrinth and challenge the others to find her. It was a whim, Sir Reginald insisted, born of youthful exuberance. But when an hour passed and she did not return, alarm had spread. The labyrinth was searched to no avail. The police, led by Inspector Gregory of the Derbyshire Constabulary, had found no signs of struggle, no footprints, no clues, only the impenetrable green walls of the maze. Holmes listened in silence, his eyes half closed, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. When Sir Reginald finished, Holmes opened his eyes and fixed the baronet with a penetrating gaze. "Tell me, Sir Reginald, of this labyrinth, its history, its design, its reputation, and tell me of your niece, a character, her relationships, her state of mind." The baronet sighed. "The labyrinth is ancient, Mr. Holmes, older than the manor itself. It was built, they say, by an ancestor who sought to commune with the divine through its twists and turns. It has a dark history. 2 souls, centuries ago, are said to have perished within it, lost forever. As for Clara, she was a bright, spirited girl, much loved. Her engagement to Langley was a joy to us all, though," he hesitated, his eyes flickering with unease. "There were tensions, I confess. Beatrice, her cousin, envied Clara's charm, perhaps, and Captain Marlowe, he made remarks, jests about Clara's beauty that were not entirely proper." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the other guests? Mrs. Prescott, Dr. Vance?" "Mrs. Prescott is a dear friend, widowed these 5 years, with a fortune of her own. She doted on Clara. Dr. Vance is a man of science, reserved but dependable. He was the first to search the labyrinth when Clara did not return." "I see," said Holmes, rising. "I should like to meet these guests, Sir Reginald, and to see the labyrinth for myself. Watson, will you accompany me?" The labyrinth lay beyond the formal gardens, a sprawling maze of yew hedges, their dark foliage absorbing the fading light. As Holmes and Watson approached, the air grew colder, and a faint mist curled around the entrance. A stone arch carved with faded runes. Holmes paused, his keen eyes scanning the ground. the hedges, the sky above. "Observe, Watson," he said softly. "No footprints, no broken twigs, no signs of disturbance. Yet, a young woman has vanished into this maze as if swallowed by the earth itself." Watson shivered, not entirely from the cold. "It's uncanny, Holmes. Do you think—" Silent and inscrutable, guarding its secrets with an ancient, unyielding patience. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Crime. The great hall of Ashbourne Manor was steeped in an oppressive silence. As the evening deepened, the flickering light of the chandelier casting long, wavering shadows across the polished oak floor. The guests, summoned by Sir Reginald at Sherlock Holmes' request, assembled with an air of reluctant curiosity, their faces betraying a mix of grief, suspicion, and unease. The disappearance of Miss Clara Ashbourne had cast a pall over the house, and the arrival of the renowned detective from London only heightened the tension. Dr. Watson, seated near the fire with his notebook discreetly open, observed the scene with a physician's eye, noting the strained postures and furtive glances of those gathered. Holmes, standing by the mantelpiece, his lean figure outlined against the glow, surveyed the room with the calm intensity of a predator assessing its prey. Sir Reginald, his face haggard, introduced the party. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, these are the members of our ill-fated gathering," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "My niece, Miss Beatrice Ashbourne, Mr. Edward Langley, Clara's fiancé, Captain Hugh Marlowe, Mrs. Evelyn Prescott, and Dr. Lionel Vance. They were all present when Clara vanished." Holmes inclined his head, his sharp eyes moving from one face to another, as if reading the secrets etched in their expressions. Beatrice Ashbourne, a pale woman of perhaps 30, sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her dark eyes fixed on the floor. Edward Langley, a handsome man with a strained jaw, clutched a glass of brandy, his gaze darting nervously. Captain Marlowe, broad-shouldered and ruddy-faced, lounged with a forced nonchalance, though his fingers drummed restlessly on the arm of his chair. Mrs. Prescott, an elegant widow draped in mourning black, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while Dr. Vance, a thin man with a scholarly air, adjusted his spectacles and regarded Holmes with wary curiosity. "Thank you, Sir Reginald," said Holmes, his voice smooth and precise. "I'm here to unravel the mystery of Miss Clara's disappearance, and I shall require your cooperation. Let us begin with the facts. Miss Clara entered the labyrinth at approximately 6 o'clock on the evening of the 12th. She was not seen again. I wish to hear from each of you. Where were you at that hour, and what did you observe?" A murmur of discomfort passed through the room. Beatrice spoke first, her voice low but steady. "I was in the library, reading. I had no interest in Clara's game. She was always so impulsive." Her tone carried a faint edge, and Watson noted it in his book. Langley cleared his throat. "I was with Clara just before she entered the labyrinth. We were on the terrace, laughing about the maze and her challenge. I urged her not to go alone, but she insisted. I waited for it. But when she didn't return, I went to fetch Sir Reginald." His voice broke, and he looked away, his knuckles whitening around the glass.
Captain Marlowe leaned forward, his eyes glinting.
"I was in the billiard room with Dr. Vance, having a smoke. We heard the commotion later, when they realized Clara was missing. Damned foolish, that girl, running off into that maze at dusk."
Dr. Vance nodded.
"As Captain Marlowe says, we were together. I went to the labyrinth as soon as I heard, but there was no sign of her. The paths are devilishly confusing."
Mrs. Prescott's voice trembled as she spoke.
"I was in my room, resting after dinner. Clara had been so radiant that evening, so full of life. I never dreamed—"
She trailed off, pressing the handkerchief to her lips. Holmes listened in silence, his face impassive, though Watson knew his friend was cataloguing every word, every inflection. "And you, Sir Reginald?" Holmes prompted.
"I was in my study, going over estate accounts," the baronet replied. "I joined the search when Edward came to me.
We scoured the labyrinth until midnight but found nothing. Holmes nodded, pacing slowly before the fire. Let us reconstruct the evening. Miss Clara proposed her game during dinner, I presume. Yes, said Langley. She was in high spirits, teasing us all. She said the labyrinth held no terrors for her, that she knew its secrets. It was a jest, nothing more. Yet she entered alone, Holmes mused. And no one saw her after she passed beneath the stone arch? A chorus of murmurs confirmed this. Holmes paused, his gaze settling on the fire. Very well. I shall need to examine the labyrinth again at first light, and I request that no one enter it until then. Now, tell me of Miss Clara's relationships. Was she universally admired? An uneasy silence followed. Beatrice's lips tightened, and Langley shifted uncomfortably. It was Mrs. Prescott who spoke, her voice soft but clear. Clara was beloved, Mr. Holmes, but she was spirited. She could be thoughtless, unaware of how her charm affected others. There were, perhaps, jealousies. Jealousies? Holmes's tone was sharp, inviting elaboration. Beatrice's eyes flashed. If you mean me, Mrs. Prescott, say it plainly. Clara was my cousin, and I cared for her. But she had a way of drawing all attention to herself. It was trying, at times. Langley's face darkened. That's unfair, Beatrice. Clara was generous, kind. She didn't seek to overshadow anyone. Captain Marlowe chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. Come now, Langley. She had you wrapped around her finger. And not just you. Half the men in the county were smitten, and she knew it. Holmes raised a hand.
As this is why her disappearance is so confounding. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Love, Sir Reginald, is as potent a motive for crime as hate. I shall retire now, but I will speak with each of you individually tomorrow. Good night. As the guests dispersed, Watson followed Holmes to their rooms, his mind buzzing with questions. What do you make of it, Holmes? He asked, closing the door behind them. They all seem shaken, but there's something they're not saying. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling around his angular features. Indeed, Watson, the labyrinth is not the only maze in this affair. Each of these people is hiding something. Jealousy, fear, perhaps guilt. The alibis are too neat, too rehearsed. And yet there is one detail that intrigues me. What's that? Watson asked, leaning forward. Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke. The labyrinth itself. Sir Reginald spoke of its history, of lives lost within it, yet no one mentions how Clara, a young woman familiar with the estate, could vanish so completely. There is a pattern here, Watson, a design I have yet to discern. Tomorrow we shall walk those paths ourselves. The next morning dawned grey and cold, the mist clinging to the grounds of Ashbourne Manor like a shroud. Holmes and Watson stood at the entrance to the labyrinth, the stone arch looming above them. Holmes knelt, examining the ground with a magnifying glass, his fingers brushing the damp earth. No footprints, Watson, he murmured. No signs of struggle. Yet Clara entered here, and here the trail ends. Watson peered into the dark, twisting paths of the maze. Could she have wandered off, Holmes? Lost her way? Holmes's eyes gleamed with a fierce intensity. No, Watson. This is no accident. Someone, or something, ensured that Clara Ashbourne did not emerge from this labyrinth, and I shall discover who and why. As they stepped into the maze, the yew hedges seemed to close around them, the air growing heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. The mystery of Ashbourne Manor had only begun to unravel, and Watson felt a chill that had little to do with the morning mist. Chapter 3. The Arrival of the Detective. The morning mist hung low over Ashbourne Manor, wrapping the ancient yew hedges of the labyrinth in a ghostly veil. Sherlock Holmes, clad in his Inverness cape, stood at the entrance to the maze, his sharp eyes scanning the stone arch with its weathered runes. Dr. Watson, ever at his side, clutched his coat against the chill, his breath visible in the crisp air. The manor loomed behind them, its windows like dark unblinking eyes, and the silence of the grounds was broken only by the distant caw of a rook. Holmes had arrived at Ashbourne Hollow less than 12 hours ago, yet his presence had already stirred the household, as if his very gaze could unravel the secrets hidden within its walls. Watson, said Holmes, his voice low and precise, observe the arch. The moss is undisturbed. The stones bear no fresh scratches. Whatever happened to Miss Clara? It began here, at the threshold of the labyrinth. He knelt, his magnifying glass catching the weak sunlight as he examined the earth. No footprints, no signs of a struggle. Curious, is it not, that a young woman could vanish so completely? Watson nodded, his mind still grappling with the events of the previous evening. It's as if the labyrinth swallowed her, Holmes. But surely there must be some trace, a hairpin, a scrap of fabric. Holmes rose, dusting his hands. Patience, Watson. The labyrinth will yield its secrets, but we must approach it with method. Come, let us explore its paths. The maze was a marvel of ancient design, its high, dense hedges forming a complex network of twists and turns. Holmes moved with purpose, his long strides measured, pausing occasionally to note the angle of a branch or the texture of the soil. Watson followed, his revolver a comforting weight in his pocket, though he felt the oppressive weight of the maze's silence. After several minutes, they reached a small clearing at the heart of the labyrinth, where a stone bench sat beneath a gnarled oak. Holmes examined it closely, his fingers tracing the weathered surface. A place for reflection, he murmured. Or perhaps for secrets. Note the moss here, Watson, slightly disturbed as if someone sat recently. But no other signs. The labyrinth is a silent witness, yet it speaks to those who listen. Their exploration was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Inspector Gregory, a stout man with a weathered face, emerged from a side path, his expression one of weary frustration. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, tipping his hat. "I trust you found something we missed? My men have combed this maze for 2 days, and not a clue to be had." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Your men, Inspector, are diligent, but lack imagination. The absence of evidence is itself evidence. Tell me, what is your theory of Miss Clara's disappearance?" Gregory sighed, rubbing his temples. "If I'm honest, Mr. Holmes, I'm stumped. The girl went into the maze alone, that much we know. No one saw her leave, and there's no sign of foul play. My best guess is she got lost, perhaps fainted, though we've searched every inch. The locals whisper of curses, but I don't hold with such nonsense." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Curses are the refuge of the unimaginative, Inspector, but they often cloak human motives. I should like to speak with the household again, individually this time. Arrange it, if you please." Back at the manor, Holmes began his interviews in the library, a room lined with leather-bound volumes and heavy with the scent of aged paper. Watson sat quietly, his notebook open, as Holmes questioned each guest with the precision of a surgeon. First was Miss Beatrice Ashbourne, her pale
tremor. "Miss Ashbourne," Holmes began, his tone courteous yet probing. "You were in this very room when your cousin vanished. What were you reading?" Beatrice's eyes flickered. "A volume of Shelley's poetry," she replied. "I often retreat here for solitude. Clara's games held no interest for me." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And your relationship with Miss Clara?" "You spoke of her charm last night, with a certain reserve." Beatrice's lips tightened. "Clara was my cousin, Mr. Holmes, and I loved her. But she could be thoughtless. She drew attention effortlessly, and it grated at times. But I wished her no harm." Holmes nodded, dismissing her with a wave. Next came Edward Langley, his face haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mr. Langley," said Holmes, "you were the last to see Miss Clara. Describe her mood on the terrace." Langley swallowed hard. "She was radiant, Mr. Holmes, laughing, teasing me about the maze. She said she'd wait for me at the centre, that I'd never find her. I should have gone with her." His voice cracked, and he buried his face in his hands. Holmes's expression remained impassive. "Did she mention any concerns? Any fears?" "No," Langley said, shaking his head. "She was happy, carefree. Our engagement was announced that night. It was a joyous occasion." Captain Marlowe followed, his military bearing at odds with his restless eyes. "Captain," Holmes said, "you were in the billiard room with Dr. Vance. Did you hear anything unusual?" Marlowe shrugged. "Not a thing, Holmes.
Just the usual clatter of balls and Vance droning on about his medical theories. I only heard about Clara when Langley raised the alarm. Holmes's eyes narrowed. And your opinion of Miss Clara? Marlowe grinned, though it lacked warmth. A spirited lass. Too good for Langley, if you ask me. But no harm in her, just a bit of a flirt. Mrs. Evelyn Prescott entered next, her mourning attire lending her an air of fragile dignity. "Mrs. Prescott," Holmes said, "you were resting in your room. Did you hear or see anything from your window, which I understand overlooks the gardens?" She hesitated, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. "Nothing specific, Mr. Holmes. I was indisposed, but I saw Clara earlier, so full of life. It's unthinkable that she's gone." Finally, Dr. Vance took the chair, his scholarly demeanour calm but guarded. "Dr. Vance," Holmes said, "you searched the labyrinth first. Did you notice anything amiss?" Vance adjusted his spectacles. "Nothing, Mr. Holmes. The paths were clear, the hedges undisturbed. I thought perhaps Clara had wandered off, but the maze is finite. She should have been found." Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Thank you, Doctor. That will be all."
Alone. They all seem credible, yet there's something off. Beatrice's resentment, Langley's grief, Marlowe's flippancy. Do you suspect one of them? Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward. Suspicion, Watson, is premature, without data. But I observe contradictions. Their alibis align too perfectly, and yet their emotions betray hidden currents. The labyrinth is the key, Watson. It holds the truth, and I shall extract it. That afternoon, Holmes returned to the labyrinth, this time with a ball of twine, which he used to mark their path. He moved methodically, noting the angles of the hedges, the slight variations in the soil. At the central clearing, he paused, his eyes fixed on the stone bench. "Watson," he said suddenly, "do you see this?" He pointed to a faint scratch on the bench's edge, barely visible. Watson squinted. "A mark, Holmes? It could be anything." Holmes' smile was enigmatic. "Or it could be everything. Tomorrow we shall test a theory. For now, let us return to the manor. The game, Watson, is afoot." As they retraced their steps, the labyrinth seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its secrets tantalizingly close, yet maddeningly out of reach. Holmes' mind, Watson knew, was already weaving a net to ensnare the truth, and he could only wait to see what it would catch. Chapter 4. The Questions Deepen. The library of Ashbourne Manor, with its towering shelves and the musty scent of ancient tomes, provided a fitting stage for Sherlock Holmes's relentless pursuit of truth. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting pale beams across the room, where dust motes danced like secrets in the air. Holmes sat at a heavy oak table, his lean frame poised with the stillness of a predator, his sharp eyes fixed on the small notebook in which he had begun to sketch a rough map of the labyrinth. Dr. Watson, seated opposite, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and impatience, knowing that beneath Holmes's calm exterior, his mind was a whirlwind of deduction. "Watson," said Holmes without looking up, "the labyrinth is not merely a physical structure, but a metaphor for this case. Its paths twist and turn, concealing the truth, yet every turn brings us closer to the center, if we know how to look." Watson nodded, though his practical mind struggled with the abstraction. "You've interviewed everyone, Holmes, and examined the labyrinth twice. Have you found anything concrete? That scratch on the bench, does it mean something?" Holmes's lips curved in a faint smile. "Patience, my dear Watson. The scratch is a whisper, not a shout, but it speaks of presence, of intent. Today we shall probe deeper. I wish to understand the dynamics of this household, the currents of..." Nearby seemed both intrigued and exasperated by Holmes's methodical approach, but he refrained from interfering. The first to enter was Miss Beatrice Ashbourne, her dark eyes wary as she took her seat. "Miss Ashbourne," Holmes began, his tone deceptively mild, "you mentioned reading Shelley on the evening of Clara's disappearance. A curious choice for a festive occasion. Did you find solace in his verses, or were you perhaps avoiding the company?" Beatrice's cheeks flushed slightly. "I enjoy poetry, Mr. Holmes, and I am not one for frivolous games. Clara's idea of a maze chase seemed childish to me. I preferred the quiet of the library." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And yet you were aware of her plans? Did you see her enter the labyrinth from the library window?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. "I glanced out once or twice. I saw her on the terrace with Edward, laughing. Then she walked toward the maze. I returned to my book." Holmes made a note, his expression unreadable. "One final question. Your cousin's engagement to Mr. Langley, did it please you?" Beatrice's lips tightened. "It was her choice, Mr. Holmes. I wished her happiness, though I thought her too young to settle." Holmes dismissed her with a nod, and Edward Langley took her place, his face pale and drawn. "Mr. Langley," said Holmes, "you described Miss Clara as radiant on the terrace, yet you did not follow her into the labyrinth. Why?" Langley's hands clenched. "I should have, Mr. Holmes. I meant to join her, but she teased me, saying I'd get lost. I thought she'd return in minutes. When she didn't." His voice faltered, and he looked away, his eyes glistening. Holmes's tone remained steady. "Did Miss Clara ever speak of fears? Of anyone who might wish her harm?" "No," Langley said firmly. "She was loved by all. If anyone had a grudge, they hid it well." Next came Captain Hugh Marlowe, his swagger tempered by the gravity of the situation. "Captain," Holmes said, "you and Dr. Vance were together in the billiard room. Yet you seem a man of action. Did you not consider joining Miss Clara's game?" Marlowe chuckled, though it sounded forced. "Not my sort of sport, Holmes. I prefer cards or a good hunt. Besides, Vance was bending my ear about some medical journal. I stayed put." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And your remarks about Miss Clara's beauty, did they ever cause friction with Mr. Langley?" Marlowe shrugged. "Langley's a jealous sort, but it was all in jest. Clara knew how to handle a compliment." Mrs. Evelyn Prescott followed, her composure fragile as she clutched her handkerchief. "Mrs. Prescott," Holmes said gently, "you were close to Miss Clara. Did she confide in you about her engagement or her plans for the evening?" Love for Edward, of her dreams for their future. That evening, she was so happy, so full of life. I can't imagine who would harm her. Finally, Dr. Lionel Vance entered, his scholarly air tinged with unease. "Dr. Vance," said Holmes, "you were quick to search the labyrinth. As a man of science, what is your opinion of its supposed curse?" Vance adjusted his spectacles. "Superstition, Mr. Holmes. The labyrinth is merely a complex structure, not a supernatural entity. Clara's disappearance is a human tragedy, not a ghostly one." Holmes leans back, his fingers steepled. "And yet, you found no trace of her. Did you examine the central clearing, the stone bench?" Vance nodded. "I did, but saw nothing unusual. The maze is disorienting, but I know its paths well." As Vance left, Watson closed his notebook, his brow furrowed. "Holmes, they're all consistent, yet I sense they're holding back. Beatrice's resentment, Marlowe's flippancy, there's more here than they're saying." Holmes rose, pacing slowly. "Precisely, Watson. Their stories align too neatly, like a rehearsed play. But there are cracks in the facade. Beatrice's glance from the window, Langley's hesitation, Marlowe's jests, they all point to undercurrents of motive. And the labyrinth itself." He paused, his eyes distant. It is not just a maze of hedges, but a maze of minds. That afternoon, Holmes and Watson returned to the labyrinth, armed with the twine and Holmes's unrelenting curiosity. The mist had lifted, but the air remained heavy, the hedges looming like silent sentinels. Holmes moved with precision, retracing their earlier path to the central clearing. There, he knelt by the stone bench, his magnifying glass hovering over the faint scratch he had noted before. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "this mark is not random. It is deliberate, made with a sharp object, perhaps a ring or a knife. Someone sat here, and in their agitation left this trace." Watson frowned. "Clara, perhaps, or someone else?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "That is the question. I have a theory, Watson, but it requires confirmation. Tonight I shall observe the household at dinner. The human heart betrays itself in unguarded moments." That evening, the dining room was a study in strained civility. The guests, dressed in formal attire, sat around the long table, their conversation stilted. Holmes, seated beside Sir Reginald, watched with the intensity of a hawk. Watson noted how Beatrice avoided Langley's gaze, how Marlowe's laugh rang hollow, how Mrs. Prescott's hand trembled as she lifted her glass. Dr. Vance, meanwhile, seemed detached, his eyes fixed on his plate. As the meal concluded, Holmes rose, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen,
and I invite you all to join me. The truth, I assure you, will not remain hidden." A ripple of unease passed through the room, and Watson felt a chill. Holmes's words were a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down. As they retired for the night, Watson whispered, "Holmes, you're baiting them. Do you know who's responsible?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "Not yet, Watson, but the net is tightening. The labyrinth will speak, and when it does, the guilty will have nowhere to hide." The manor settled into an uneasy silence, but Watson sensed the storm gathering, as if the very walls of Ashbourne Manor knew that the truth was drawing near. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The dining room of Ashbourne Manor, with its high ceiling and somber portraits, seemed to close in upon its occupants as the third day of Clara Ashbourne's disappearance dawned. The air was thick with unspoken suspicions, and the guests' polite facades had begun to crack under the weight of Sherlock Holmes's relentless scrutiny. Dr. Watson, seated at breakfast with his notebook discreetly tucked beneath his napkin, observed the strained interactions. Beatrice's clipped responses, Langley's haggard silence, Marlowe's forced joviality, Mrs. Prescott's nervous glances, and Dr. Vance's detached calm. Holmes, however, appeared serene, his sharp eyes missing nothing as he sipped his coffee with deliberate calm. Inspector Gregory joined them, his face etched with frustration. "Mr. Holmes," he said, setting down his cup. "My men have searched the grounds again, every hedge, every ditch, nothing. The villagers are starting to talk, saying the labyrinth's curse has taken Miss Clara. I don't believe in such rot, but it's making my job harder." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "The curse, Inspector, is a convenient distraction, but it will not deter us. I have observed enough to know that the solution lies not in superstition, but in human nature. Today we shall test the waters and see what rises to the surface." Watson leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You suspect someone, don't you, Holmes? That business with the scratch on the bench, it's significant, isn't it?" Holmes's eyes gleamed. "All in good time, Watson. For now, let us consider the obvious suspect, the one the facts seem to point to, yet who may be nothing more than a red herring." The morning's inquiries began in the drawing room, where Holmes had requested the household staff to assemble. Grayson, the butler, stood stiffly, his lined face betraying nothing, while the maids and footmen shifted uneasily under Holmes's gaze. "Grayson," said Holmes, "you were in the hall when Miss Clara proposed her game."
"One else near the labyrinth?" Holmes pressed. No, sir. The grounds were quiet, save for the guests in the house." Holmes nodded, dismissing the staff, but Watson noted the detective's keen interest in Grayson's precise recollection. "He's too certain," Holmes murmured as they stepped outside. "A butler's memory is trained, but his clarity suggests rehearsal. We shall keep an eye on him." The focus soon shifted to Edward Langley, whose grief had made him the natural suspect in the eyes of Inspector Gregory. The inspector, pacing the terrace, voiced his theory to Holmes and Watson. "Langley was the last to see her, Mr. Holmes. He admits they were alone on the terrace, and he's been a wreck since. Lovers' quarrels can turn ugly, you know. Suppose he followed her into the maze, lost his temper." Holmes raised a hand, his expression cool. "A plausible theory, Inspector, but it lacks evidence. Langley's grief appears genuine, and his alibi, waiting on the terrace, is corroborated by Grayson. Let us not leap to conclusions. The truth is often obscured by the obvious." To test this, Holmes requested a private walk with Langley through the gardens, away from the labyrinth's shadow. Watson trailed behind, noting Langley's slumped shoulders and trembling hands. "Mr. Langley," Holmes said, his tone almost gentle, "your devotion to Miss Clara is evident, but I must ask, was there any discord between you? A disagreement, however slight?" Langley's eyes flashed with pain. "Never, Mr. Holmes. Clara was my world. We spoke of our future that evening, our home in London, our plans. She was teasing, playful. If I'd known—" He broke off, his voice choked. Holmes studied him, his gaze piercing yet not unkind. "And her relationships with others. Captain Marlowe, for instance, his remarks about her beauty. Did they trouble you?" Langley's jaw tightened. "Marlowe's a cad, Mr. Holmes, but Clara laughed off his flirtations. She said he was harmless, though I didn't like it. I trusted her." Holmes nodded, his face unreadable. As they returned to the manor, Watson whispered, "Do you believe him, Holmes? He seems broken, but could it be guilt?" Holmes's voice was low. "Guilt or grief, Watson. The symptoms are often indistinguishable. Langley is a suspect, but not the only one. The net must widen." The afternoon brought a new development. Inspector Gregory, flushed with excitement, summoned Holmes to the stables, where a stable boy had found a silk scarf snagged on a bramble near the labyrinth's edge. "It's Miss Clara, sir," Gregory said, holding up the delicate fabric embroidered with her initials. "Found just this morning. Could mean she left the maze after all, or someone took it there." Holmes examined the scarf, his magnifying glass glinting. Freshly torn, yet clean. No dirt. Pointed to a spot just beyond the labyrinth's entrance. "Right there, sir. Caught on the thorns. I didn't see it yesterday." Holmes knelt, inspecting the bramble. "The scarf was placed here recently, Watson. The tear is too clean for it to have been exposed to the elements for 2 days. Someone wishes to divert us." Gregory frowned. "You think it's a plant, Mr. Holmes? But who?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "That, Inspector, is what we shall discover. For now, let us keep this find quiet. The guilty will reveal themselves through their actions." Back at the manor, Holmes gathered the guests in the drawing room, his demeanor calm but commanding. "A development has occurred," he announced, holding up the scarf. "This was found near the labyrinth. Does anyone recognize it?" A collective gasp rose. Mrs. Prescott's hand flew to her mouth. "It's Clara's!"
I gave it to her last Christmas. Oh, does this mean she's alive?" Beatrice's face paled, and Langley staggered, gripping a chair. Marlowe's eyes flickered, while Vance remained impassive. Holmes watched them all, his silence more probing than any question. "Mr. Holmes," Langley said hoarsely, "does this mean she left the maze? Could she be lost in the woods?" Holmes's voice was measured. "It means, Mr. Langley, that someone wishes us to believe so. But I assure you the truth lies elsewhere." As the guests dispersed, Watson followed Holmes to their rooms, his mind racing. "Holmes, that scarf. It's a deliberate clue, isn't it? Someone's trying to mislead us." Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like a question mark. "Precisely, Watson. The scarf is a red herring, placed to distract us from the labyrinth itself. But it tells us something vital. The guilty party is among us, and they are growing nervous. Tonight, we shall watch closely. A careless word, a glance may betray them." That evening, dinner was a tense affair, the guests' eyes darting to the scarf, now laid on a sideboard like an accusation. Holmes, seated beside Watson, spoke little, but his gaze missed nothing. The way Beatrice avoided the scarf, the way Marlowe's hand lingered near his wineglass, the way Mrs. Prescott's tears seemed rehearsed. As the meal ended, Holmes rose, his voice cutting through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the labyrinth holds the key to Miss Clara's fate. Tomorrow, I shall conduct a final search, and I invite you to join me. The truth cannot hide forever." As the guests retired, Watson whispered, "Holmes, you're setting a trap, aren't you?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic.
Reluctant light, as if the sun itself hesitated to illuminate the secrets buried within the labyrinth's green walls. Sherlock Holmes, ever the early riser, stood at the window of his guest room, his silhouette sharp against the gray morning. Dr. Watson, roused by his friend's quiet movements, joined him, noting the detective's intense focus. Holmes's hands were clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the distant labyrinth, its dark hedges barely visible through the thinning mist. "Watson," said Holmes, his voice low and deliberate, "today we shall uncover a truth hidden in plain sight. The scarf was a distraction, but the labyrinth itself holds a clue we have overlooked. A single detail, properly interpreted, will unravel this mystery." Watson rubbed sleep from his eyes. "That scratch on the bench, Holmes. You keep returning to it. What does it signify?" Holmes's lips curved faintly. "It is not merely the scratch, Watson, but what it implies about presence and purpose. Come, let us return to the maze before the household stirs." The labyrinth was silent as they entered, the air heavy with the scent of damp yew and earth. Holmes moved with precision, his twine trailing behind to mark their path. At the central clearing, he knelt by the stone bench, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the scratch once more. "Observe, Watson," he said, pointing to the faint mark. "It is not a random gouge, but a deliberate incision, made by a metal object, likely a ring or a small blade. The angle suggests it was made by someone seated, perhaps in agitation." Watson squinted, struggling to see the significance. "But who, Holmes? Clara? One of the others?" Holmes rose, his eyes scanning the clearing. "That is what we must determine. But note this, Watson. The moss around the bench is disturbed in a pattern inconsistent with a single visitor. There are faint compressions, as if two people sat here, or one returned multiple times." Before Watson could respond, the sound of footsteps interrupted them. Inspector Gregory appeared, his face flushed from the cold. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "I've brought the groundskeeper, Mr. Harrow. He knows the labyrinth better than anyone." thought he might shed some light. Harrow, a wiry man with weathered hands, nodded respectfully. Been tending these grounds for 30 years, sir. The maze is a queer place. Paths shift if you don't know 'em. But I checked it the night Miss Clara vanished. Nothing amiss. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Nothing amiss, Mr. Harrow? Yet a young woman disappeared. Tell me, have you ever found objects in the labyrinth, items left behind? Harrow hesitated, then nodded. Aye, sir. Over the years, bits and bobs, hairpins, gloves, once a locket, but nothing since Miss Clara's time. Holmes's gaze sharpened. A locket bench, maybe 10 years back. Gave it to Sir Reginald. Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson. Thank you, Mr. Harrow. That will be all for now. As Harrow and Gregory departed, Watson whispered, A locket, Holmes? Could it be connected? Possibly, Holmes murmured. The labyrinth has a history of secrets. We must speak to Sir Reginald about this locket. Back at the manor, Holmes requested a private audience with Sir Reginald in his study, a cluttered room filled with estate ledgers and family portraits. The baronet, looking more haggard than ever, greeted them with a weary nod. Mr. Holmes, have you found something? He asked, his voice tinged with hope. Perhaps, said Holmes, seating himself. Tell me, Sir Reginald, of a silver locket, heart-shaped with a rose engraving, found in the labyrinth some years ago. Sir Reginald's face paled. The locket. Yes, I remember it. It belonged to my sister, Margaret, Clara's mother. She lost it years ago before she passed. How did you know? Holmes' expression remained impassive. It was found in the labyrinth near the bench. Does it hold significance to the family? Sir Reginald sighed, his eyes distant. Margaret loved the labyrinth. She used to walk its paths, even at night. After she died, Clara took to it as well, as if drawn to her mother's memory. The locket was a keepsake, nothing more. Holmes leaned forward. And Clara, did she ever speak of the locket or the labyrinth's history? Not directly, Sir Reginald said. But she was fascinated by the maze, its stories of lost souls. She thought them romantic, not sinister. Holmes rose, his mind clearly racing. Thank you, Sir Reginald. This locket may be a thread in our tapestry. I must examine it, if it is still in your possession. The baronet retrieved the locket from a locked drawer, handing it to Holmes with trembling fingers. Holmes studied it, noting the worn clasp and the faint scratches on its surface. Curious, he murmured, slipping it into his pocket. Watson, we return to the labyrinth. The afternoon was spent in meticulous exploration, Holmes pausing at every turn to examine the hedges, the soil, the air itself. At the bench, he produced the locket, holding it against the scratch. See here, Watson, he said. The locket's edge matches the mark. It was pressed against the stone, perhaps in a moment of distress. Watson's brow furrowed. Clara's distress? Or someone else's? Holmes' eyes gleamed. That, Watson, is the question. The locket connects Clara to the labyrinth, but it also connects her to her mother's past. There is a pattern here, a history we have yet to uncover. As evening approached, Holmes gathered the guests in the drawing room, his demeanor calm but commanding. That matches one on the bench where Clara may have sat. Does anyone know how it came to be there? A tense silence followed. Beatrice's eyes widened, Langley's hands clenched, and Marlowe's smile faltered. Mrs. Prescott gasped softly, while Vance remained impassive. No one, Holmes pressed, his voice like a blade. Very well, I shall continue my inquiries, but know this, the labyrinth is speaking, and its secrets will not remain hidden. As the guests dispersed, Watson followed Holmes to their rooms, his mind buzzing. Holmes, that locket, it's a vital clue, isn't it? But how does it fit?
Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward. It fits, Watson, because it ties Clara to the labyrinth's past. The scratch, the locket, the disturbed moss, they point to a moment of significance, a meeting perhaps, or a confrontation. Someone in this house knows more than they admit. That night, as the manor settled into uneasy silence, Watson lay awake, the locket's image fixed in his mind. Watson late. How a hend. Watson, a score lies. It setters a more clars. Anything. End. On. Start. All shabbing. The labyrinth seeming to pulse through the very walls of the manor, onto the labyrinth souths of Griving on the family, said scene on Via de Standardschi on Palm. You'll be find a man solves that the same kind of polled feemings investi. Reginald's can serve this time, and letsify solved into the
Significance. Was there an event in her life, perhaps tied to the labyrinth, that you have not shared? Sir Reginald's hands trembled as he reached for the locket.
Margaret. She was a troubled soul, Mr. Holmes. She loved the labyrinth, spent hours there, even after dark. She died young of a fever, or so the doctors said. But there were whispers, village gossip, that she met someone in the maze, a secret lover. I dismissed it as nonsense, but the locket, she wore it always. Holmes's gaze sharpened. A lover? And did Clara ever speak of this tale? Sir Reginald shook his head. Clara was a child when Margaret died. I shielded her from such stories, but she was drawn to the labyrinth as if it called to her. Holmes nodded, his mind clearly racing. Thank you, Sir Reginald. Keep this locket safe. It may yet speak further. The next to be questioned was Captain Hugh Marlowe, whose casual demeanor had begun to fray under Holmes's scrutiny. In the drawing room, Marlowe lounged with a cigar, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as Holmes entered. Captain, said Holmes, your remarks about Miss Clara's beauty have been noted. Did you ever meet her in the labyrinth, perhaps for a private conversation? Marlowe's laugh was forced. Good Lord, Holmes, you make it sound sordid. I admired Clara, as any man would. But I never set foot in that maze with her. Too many thorns for my taste. Holmes leaned forward, his voice like a blade. And yet you were quick to jest about her engagement. Did you harbor feelings for her, Captain? Feelings that Mr. Langley might have resented? Marlowe's face reddened. You're barking up the wrong tree, Holmes. I'm a soldier, not a lovesick fool. Langley's the one you should be grilling. He was possessive, always hovering over her. Holmes dismissed him with a wave, but Watson noted the captain's clenched fists as he left. He's hiding something, Holmes, Watson whispered. His bluster doesn't ring true. Indeed, Holmes replied. Marlowe's denial is too vehement, and his alibi with Dr. Vance is too convenient. Let us see what the good doctor has to say. Dr. Lionel Vance, summoned next, entered with his usual scholarly calm, though his spectacles glinted nervously in the light. Dr. Vance, said Holmes, you and Captain Marlowe claim to have been in the billiard room at the time of Clara's disappearance, yet you were the first to search the labyrinth. Why such haste? Vance adjusted his glasses. I was concerned, Mr. Holmes. Clara was a patient of mine, a healthy young woman. Her failure to return alarmed me. I know the labyrinth well, so I went at once. Holmes's eyes narrowed. And your relationship with the Ashbourne family, how long have you served them? 15 years, Vance replied. I attended Margaret, Clara's mother, in
Whispers of a secret lover? Did you hear them? Vance hesitated, his composure faltering. Village gossip, Mr. Holmes. I paid it no mind. Margaret was ill, not unfaithful. Holmes nodded, dismissing him. But Watson sensed a shift in his friend's demeanor. Holmes, he said, you're circling something. Margaret's lover, the locket, the labyrinth, what's the connection? Holmes lit his pipe. the smoke curling like a question. The connection, Watson, is motive. Margaret's past holds a secret that someone fears Clara uncovered. The locket is a link, but we need more. Let us return to the labyrinth. The afternoon found them once more in the maze, Holmes's twine trailing behind as he examined the central clearing with renewed intensity. He paused by the oak tree, its gnarled roots spreading like veins into the earth. "Watson," he said, kneeling, "look here, a faint indentation in the soil, partially obscured by leaves. It suggests something was buried, then removed." Watson peered at the spot, seeing only a slight disturbance. "A hiding place, Holmes, for what?" Holmes' fingers brushed the earth. Perhaps a letter, a keepsake, something tied to the locket's history. "We must search the manor for such an item." Their search led them to Clara's room, a feminine space adorned with lace curtains and a writing desk. Holmes examined the desk, his fingers probing for hidden compartments. With a soft click, a panel sprang open, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. Holmes untied them, his eyes scanning the faded ink. "Love letters," he murmured, "addressed to Margaret Ashbourne from an unnamed suitor. They speak of meetings in the labyrinth, of promises made under the oak. And look here, Watson, the final letter, dated weeks before Margaret's death, speaks of a betrayal." Watson's heart quickened. A betrayal? Could this be why Clara was targeted? Did she find these letters? Holmes' gaze was distant. Possibly. If Clara discovered her mother's secret, it may have threatened someone's standing, someone in this house. That evening at dinner, the tension was palpable. Holmes, seated beside Sir Reginald, spoke little, but his eyes roamed the table, noting every glance, every hesitation. Beatrice's hands shook as she lifted her glass. Marlowe's laugh was strained, and Mrs. Prescott's tears seemed rehearsed. Langley stared at his plate, while Vance's calm facade showed cracks. As the meal ended, Holmes rose, his voice commanding silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I have uncovered evidence that suggests Miss Clara's disappearance is tied to a secret from her mother's past. Tomorrow I shall confront this truth in the labyrinth. I urge you all to attend." The room fell silent, faces paling. Watson felt a chill, knowing Holmes was tightening the net.
Them. Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "That, Watson, is what we shall discover. The labyrinth is a mirror, reflecting the lies of those who enter it. Tomorrow one of them will break." The manor settled into a restless quiet, but Watson sensed the storm brewing, the truth inching closer with every heartbeat. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The air in Ashbourne Manor was thick with foreboding as the fourth day of Clara Ashbourne's disappearance dawned. The discovery of the love letters hidden in Clara's desk had cast a new light on the mystery, suggesting a connection between her fate and a long-buried secret from her mother's past. Sherlock Holmes, with his unerring instinct for truth, sensed that the household was on the verge of a revelation, a crack in the carefully constructed facades of its inhabitants. Dr. Watson, ever attentive, watched his friend with a mix of anticipation and unease, knowing that Holmes's methodical approach was about to provoke a reaction that could unravel the case. In the library, where the morning light filtered through heavy drapes, Holmes sat with the letters spread before him, his sharp eyes scanning the faded script. Watson, seated opposite, noted the detective's intense focus, his fingers tracing the words as if they held the key to the labyrinth itself. "Holmes," said Watson, "these letters, they're a bombshell. A secret lover, a betrayal. Do you think Clara found them and confronted someone?" Holmes's gaze flicked upward, his expression enigmatic. Precisely, Watson. The letters suggest a motive rooted in the past, one that Clara's curiosity may have reawakened. The question is, who felt threatened by her discovery? Today we shall apply pressure and see who breaks. The morning's inquiries began with a private interview with Mrs. Evelyn Prescott, whose fragile demeanor had begun to seem less genuine under Holmes's scrutiny. In the drawing room, she sat with her lace handkerchief clutched tightly, her eyes darting nervously as Holmes placed the letters on the table. "Mrs. Prescott," he said, his voice calm but incisive. "These letters, found in Miss Clara's desk, speak of a love affair involving her mother, Margaret. You were a close friend of the family. Did you know of this liaison?" Mrs. Prescott's face paled, her hands trembling. "Mr. Holmes, Margaret was dear to me, but she was private about her heart. I heard rumors, yes, of a man she met in the labyrinth, but I never knew his name. She was so young, so vulnerable after her husband's death." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And Clara, did she ever speak of these rumors, or of finding—"
Watson, ever the gentleman, offered his handkerchief, though he noted Holmes's impassive expression. "Thank you, Mrs. Prescott," Holmes said, dismissing her. "Your candor is noted." Next came Beatrice Ashburn, her pale face set in a mask of restraint. Holmes held up a letter, its ink faded but legible. "Miss Ashburn," he said, "these letters suggest your aunt, Margaret, had a secret that troubled her. As her niece, did you ever hear of such a secret, or did Clara confide in you about her findings?" Beatrice's eyes flashed with something, anger, perhaps, or fear. "Clara was always prying, Mr. Holmes. She loved romantic tales, thought the labyrinth held mysteries. If she found those letters, she never told me. I resented her sometimes, but I loved her. I would never harm her." Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. "And your own feelings about the family's past? Did you resent Margaret as well as Clara?" Beatrice's hands clenched. "My aunt was kind to me, but distant. I was a child when she died. I know nothing of her secrets." Her voice cracked, and she rose abruptly, fleeing the room. Watson frowned. "Holmes, she's shaken. Do you think she's hiding something?" Holmes's lips curved faintly. "She is hiding something, Watson, but whether it is guilt or shame remains to be seen. Let us proceed." Edward Langley was next, his grief now tinged with agitation. "Mr. Langley," Holmes said, "Clara's discovery of these letters may have endangered her. Did she ever mention them to you?" Langley's face crumpled. "No, Mr. Holmes. She spoke of her mother fondly, but never of letters. If she found them, she kept it from me. I only wanted to protect her." His voice broke, and he buried his face in his hands. Holmes's tone softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "And Captain Marlowe, did you ever suspect he had designs on Clara?" Langley's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "Marlowe was a vulture, always circling her with his jests. I warned him to stay away, but Clara laughed it off. If he touched her—" He trailed off, his fists clenched. Holmes dismissed him, and Captain Marlowe took his place, his swagger diminished. "Captain," said Holmes, "these letters suggest a scandal in the Ashburn family. Did you know Margaret Ashburn, or hear of her lover?" Marlowe's grin was strained. "I was a young officer then, Holmes, far from Derbyshire. I heard tales of Margaret's beauty, but nothing more. As for Clara, she was a flirt.
Ashbourne in her final illness. Did you know of her secret lover? Vance's fingers twitched. I heard rumors, Mr. Holmes, but I dismissed them. My concern was her health, not her heart. If Clara found those letters, she never told me. Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled. And yet, you were quick to search the labyrinth. Did you suspect a connection to Margaret's past? Vance hesitated, then shook his head. I suspected nothing, only feared for Clara's safety. As Vance left, Watson closed his notebook, his mind reeling. Holmes, they're all breaking under the pressure. Beatrice's outburst, Langley's anger, Marlowe's defensiveness, someone's lying. Holmes rose, pacing slowly. Yes, Watson, and the lies unraveling. The letters point to a secret that someone fears exposed. Tonight we shall push further. At dinner, the tension was palpable, the guests' eyes darting to the letters, which Holmes had placed on a sideboard like a silent accusation. As the meal ended, Mrs. Prescott rose, her face ashen. Mr. Holmes, she said, her voice trembling, I can bear it no longer. Clara came to me the day before she vanished, asking about her mother's locket. I told her it was lost, but she said she'd found it in the labyrinth. She was excited, said it held a secret. I begged her to let it go, but she wouldn't listen. The room froze, all eyes on Mrs. Prescott. Holmes's voice was calm. Thank you, Mrs. Prescott. Your honesty is a step toward the truth. Tomorrow we shall return to the labyrinth, and I promise you, the mystery will be resolved. As the guests dispersed, Watson followed Holmes to their rooms. Holmes, Mrs. Prescott's confession, it's a breakthrough, isn't it? Holmes's smile was enigmatic. It is a crack in the dam, Watson. The truth is flooding through, and tomorrow we shall see who drowns in it. The manor settled into a restless silence, but Watson felt the storm breaking, the labyrinth's secrets poised to spill into the light. Chapter 9. The Trap.
The fifth morning at Ashbourne Manor dawned with a sky heavy and grey, as if the heavens themselves mirrored the mounting tension within the ancient walls. Mrs. Evelyn Prescott's confession the previous evening, that Clara had found her mother's locket and spoken of a secret, had sent ripples of unease through the household, cracking the veneer of civility that had held the guests together. Sherlock Holmes, ever the master of timing, sensed that the moment was right to tighten the net around the guilty party. Dr. Watson, his faithful companion, felt the air charged with anticipation, knowing that Holmes was preparing to spring a trap that would force the truth into the open. In their guest room, Holmes stood by the window, his sharp profile etched against the dull light, his fingers drumming lightly on the sill. The bundle of Margaret Ashbourne's love letters lay on the table, alongside the silver locket, its rose engraving glinting faintly. Watson, poring over his notes, looked up. Holmes, he said, Mrs. Prescott's admission last night, it's shifted everything. Clara knew something about her mother's past, something dangerous. Do you think it's enough to solve the case? Holmes turned, his grey eyes gleaming with purpose. It is a vital piece, Watson, but not the whole. The locket and letters point to a motive, but the labyrinth holds the method. Today, we shall gather the suspects in its heart and apply pressure. The guilty will betray themselves, for the human heart cannot withstand scrutiny when cornered. Watson frowned, his practical mind grappling with Holmes's strategy. You mean to confront them all in the labyrinth, but how will you know who's lying? Holmes's smile was enigmatic. By observing, Watson, a glance, a hesitation, a bead of sweat. These are the language of guilt. Come, let us prepare. At mid-morning, Holmes summoned the household to the labyrinth's entrance, his voice carrying a quiet authority that brooked no refusal. Sir Reginald, Beatrice, Langley, Marlowe, Mrs. Prescott, and Dr. Vance gathered,
their faces a mix of apprehension and defiance. Inspector Gregory stood nearby, his notebook ready, while the manor staff lingered at a distance, their whispers adding to the eerie atmosphere. The labyrinth loomed before them, its yew hedges dark and impenetrable, the stone arch casting a shadow like a warning. "Ladies and gentlemen," Holmes began, his tone calm but resonant, "we stand at the threshold of truth. Miss Clara Ashburn entered this labyrinth 5 days ago and vanished. The locket, the letters, and her own words to Mrs. Prescott suggest she uncovered a secret tied to her mother's past. A secret someone here fears exposed. Today, we shall walk the maze together, and I shall reconstruct the events of that evening. I warn you, the labyrinth..."
Langley's hands clenched, and Marlowe's eyes darted to the hedges. Mrs. Prescott clutched her handkerchief, while Vance's scholarly calm seemed strained. Sir Reginald, his face ashen, nodded. "Do what you must, Mr. Holmes. I want answers." Holmes led the way, his twine trailing behind to mark their path. The group followed in uneasy silence, the labyrinth's twists and turns amplifying their tension. At the central clearing, Holmes paused by the stone bench, the locket in his hand. Here, he said, Clara sat, perhaps to meet someone, perhaps to confront them. The scratch on this bench, made by this locket, tells of a moment of agitation. Let us consider the evening of her disappearance. He turned to Langley, his gaze piercing. "Mr. Langley, you were with Clara on the terrace at 6 o'clock. You say she entered the labyrinth alone. Did you see anyone follow her?" Langley's voice was hoarse. "No, Mr. Holmes. I waited, thinking she'd return. I swear I saw no one." Holmes nodded, then turned to Beatrice. "Miss Ashburn, you were in the library, yet you glanced out the window. Did you see anyone near the labyrinth?" Beatrice's eyes flickered. "Only Clara, as I told you. No one else." Holmes' gaze shifted to Marlowe and Vance. "You two were in the billiard room, a convenient alibi. Yet, Captain Marlowe, your familiarity with Clara caused friction. Did you meet her here, perhaps to press your affections?" Marlowe's face reddened. "Damn your insinuations, Holmes. I was with Vance, smoking and talking. I never set foot in this maze." Vance nodded. "As I've said, Mr. Holmes, we were together. I searched the labyrinth later but found nothing." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "And you, Mrs. Prescott, knew Clara had found the locket. Did you warn anyone of her discovery?" Mrs. Prescott's voice trembled. "No, Mr. Holmes. I told her to let it be, but I spoke to no one else." Holmes paced slowly, the locket glinting in his hand. "Let us imagine a scenario. Clara, curious about her mother's past, finds the letters and locket. She suspects a secret, perhaps a scandal that threatens someone's reputation. She arranges to meet that person here, in the labyrinth's heart, to confront them. But something goes wrong, a struggle, perhaps, or a moment of panic. The locket scratches the bench, and Clara vanishes." The group stood frozen, their breaths visible in the cold air. Holmes's voice dropped, each word deliberate. "Someone here knows what happened. Someone placed Clara's scarf near the labyrinth to mislead us. Someone fears the truth of Margaret's past. I ask you now, speak."
I begged her not to, but she wouldn't listen. I didn't tell anyone, I swear, but I should have stopped her. The group stared, shocked. Langley's face twisted with anguish. "Who, Mrs. Prescott? Who was she meeting?" Mrs. Prescott shook her head, tears streaming. "She didn't say, only that it was someone who knew her mother's secret." Holmes's gaze swept the group,
noting every reaction: Beatrice's clenched jaw, Marlowe's averted eyes, Vance's rigid posture. "Thank you, Mrs. Prescott," he said. "Your words bring us closer to the truth. We shall return to the manor now, but know this: the trap is set, and the guilty cannot escape." As they retraced their steps, Watson whispered, "Holmes, you've rattled them. Mrs. Prescott's outburst, do you believe her?" Holmes's voice was low. "She speaks truth, but not all of it. Her confession protects someone, Watson. The meeting in the labyrinth was no accident. Tonight, we shall watch closely, for the guilty will act to cover their tracks." Back at the manor, the guests dispersed, their faces pale and strained. Dinner was a silent affair, the weight of Holmes's words hanging over the table. Watson noted how Beatrice avoided Langley's gaze, how Marlowe's hand shook as he poured wine, how Vance's calm seemed forced. Holmes, ever observant, spoke little, his eyes missing nothing. As they retired, Watson followed Holmes to their rooms. "Holmes," he said, "you're pushing them to the edge. What's next?" Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward. "Next, Watson, we wait. The trap is sprung, and the guilty will move tonight. We must be ready to catch them." The manor fell into a restless silence, but Watson felt the labyrinth's secrets stirring, the truth poised to break free under Holmes's unrelenting gaze. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The evening shadows deepened over Ashbourne Manor, cloaking the ancient house in a silence broken only by the creak of settling timbers and the distant howl of a wind that seemed to carry the labyrinth's secrets. Sherlock Holmes, with his trap set in the heart of the maze, had stirred the household into a state of barely concealed panic. Dr. Watson, his nerves taut from the day's revelations, sat in their guest room, his revolver cleaned and ready at Holmes's quiet insistence. The detective himself stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit glass, his pipe sending tendrils of smoke into the air. "Watson," said Holmes, his voice low and deliberate, "tonight, the guilty will move. Mrs. Prescott's confession has shaken them, and the locket, the letters, the labyrinth, they all point to a truth that can no longer be contained. We must."
The threads we've gathered, the scratch on the bench, the letters, the scarf, Mrs. Prescott's words. But a hypothesis is not proof. Tonight, we shall have it. The plan was simple, yet daring. Holmes had instructed Inspector Gregory to post constables discreetly around the manor's grounds, with particular attention to the labyrinth's entrance. Holmes and Watson, meanwhile, would keep watch from a vantage point in the gardens, hidden among the shrubs, where they could observe any movement toward the maze. The locket, returned to Sir Reginald, was locked in his study, but Holmes had left a subtle clue, a single letter from Margaret's bundle placed on the drawing-room table, as bait to lure the guilty. As midnight approached, the manor grew still, the guests having retired to their rooms. Holmes and Watson slipped into the gardens, their breath visible in the cold night air. From their hiding place, the labyrinth's stone arch was a dark silhouette against the moon's pale glow. Holmes's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the grounds, his body motionless but alert. At midnight, a figure emerged from the manor's side door, moving swiftly toward the labyrinth. Watson's heart quickened as he recognized the tall, broad-shouldered form of Captain Hugh Marlowe, his military stride unmistakable. "Holmes," Watson whispered, "it's Marlowe." Holmes raised a hand for silence, his gaze fixed on the captain. Marlowe paused at the labyrinth's entrance, glancing around, then slipped inside, a small lantern in his hand. Holmes motioned for Watson to follow, and they moved silently, using the twine from their earlier explorations to navigate the maze's twists.
They reached the central clearing just as Marlowe knelt by the stone bench, his lantern casting a flickering light. He was digging at the base of the oak tree, his movements frantic. Holmes stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Captain Marlowe, what do you seek in the labyrinth's heart at this hour?" Marlowe froze, his face pale in the lantern's glow. "Holmes, I was just—" Holmes advanced, his eyes blazing. "You were searching for something buried, perhaps? Something tied to Margaret Ashbourne's secret, which Clara uncovered?" Marlowe scrambled to his feet, his bravado gone. "You've got it wrong, Holmes. I was only—" Holmes raised a hand, silencing him. "Enough. Let us return to the manor, where all shall be explained. Inspector Gregory, if you please." Gregory emerged from the shadows, two constables at his side, their lanterns illuminating the clearing. Marlowe's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling, as he was led back to the manor. In the drawing room, the household was roused, their faces a mix of confusion and dread, as they gathered in their nightclothes. Holmes stood by the fireplace, the letter from Margaret's bundle in his hand, his presence commanding sight.
Revolver still in his pocket, watched the faces. Beatrice's pallor, Langley's anguish, Mrs. Prescott's tears, Vance's strained calm, and Sir Reginald's weary despair. "Ladies and gentlemen," Holmes began, his voice clear and precise. "The mystery of Clara Ashbourne's disappearance is solved. The truth lies in the labyrinth, in the locket, and in the letters that revealed a secret from Margaret Ashbourne's past. Allow me to reconstruct the events." He held up the letter. Margaret Ashbourne, Clara's mother, had a lover, a man who met her in the labyrinth, where they exchanged these letters. The locket, a gift from this man, was lost in the maze, found years later by Clara. Clara, curious about her mother's past, discovered the letters and confronted the one person who knew the truth, Captain Hugh Marlowe. Marlowe's face twisted. "That's a lie, Holmes. I barely knew Margaret." Holmes' gaze was unrelenting. "You were stationed in Derbyshire 20 years ago, Captain. A young officer with charm and ambition. You courted Margaret, a widow, in secret, promising marriage. But when she fell ill, you abandoned her, fearing scandal. The letters, buried in the labyrinth, were your insurance, a record of your affair, which you retrieved after her death. Clara found them, and on the night of her disappearance, she arranged to meet you in the maze to demand the truth." The room was silent, all eyes on Marlowe. Holmes continued, his voice like a scalpel. "You met Clara at the bench. She showed you the locket, accused you of betraying her mother. In a moment of panic, you struck her, perhaps harder than intended. The locket scratched the bench as she fell. Fearing discovery, you hid her body, not in the labyrinth, but in the oak tree's hollow, a place you knew from your meetings with Margaret." Marlowe's face drained of colour. "You can't prove that, Holmes." Holmes turned to Gregory. "Inspector, search the hollow of the oak in the labyrinth's centre. You will find Clara's body, concealed with leaves and earth." Gregory nodded, dispatching a constable. The room waited in breathless silence until the constable returned, his face grim. "It's true, sir. Miss Clara, she's there, dead. A blow to the head." A cry rose from Langley, who lunged at Marlowe, only to be restrained by Gregory. Mrs. Prescott sobbed, and Beatrice buried her face in her hands. Holmes raised a hand for silence. "Captain Marlowe, you placed the scarf to suggest Clara left the maze, hoping to divert suspicion. But the locket's scratch, the guilt and fear, Inspector, take him away.
As Marlowe was led out, the room erupted in murmurs. But Holmes' voice cut through. The labyrinth has spoken, and justice is served. Good night. He turned and left, Watson following, his heart heavy with the tragedy's weight. The truth, so brilliantly uncovered, brought no joy, only the somber clarity of Holmes' relentless logic. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The somber air of Ashbourne Manor lingered like a fog, heavy with the weight of tragedy and revelation. The discovery of Clara Ashbourne's body in the labyrinth's Oak Hollow, coupled with Captain Hugh Marlowe's confession, had brought the mystery to a grim close. Yet it left the household in a state of fractured mourning. The great hall, where only days ago laughter had echoed during Clara's engagement announcement, now seemed a mausoleum, its portraits gazing down with silent judgment. Sherlock Holmes, having unmasked the truth with his unrelenting logic, sat in the library, his lean frame relaxed in a high-backed chair, a faint curl of smoke rising from his pipe. Dr. Watson, ever his chronicler, sat opposite, his notebook open, but his pen idle, his thoughts consumed by the case's tragic end. "Holmes," said Watson, breaking the silence, "you've done it again, solved the unsolvable. But I confess this victory feels hollow. Clara's death, Marlowe's betrayal, it's a grim business." Holmes' grey eyes, usually so piercing, softened slightly as he gazed into the fire. "The truth, Watson, is rarely triumphant. It is a cold, clear light that illuminates both justice and sorrow. Clara Ashbourne's curiosity led her to a truth that cost her life, and Marlowe's weakness turned love into murder. Such is the human condition." Watson leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "But how did you know, Holmes? The locket, the letters, the hollow. How did you piece it together so precisely?" Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his voice measured. "It began with the labyrinth, Watson, a place of secrets, both physical and emotional. The absence of footprints at its entrance suggested Clara never left, yet her body was not in the open. The scratch on the bench, made by the locket, indicated a moment of struggle, and the locket's history tied it to Margaret's past. The letters, hidden in Clara's desk, spoke of a love affair, and Mrs. Prescott's confession confirmed Clara's intent to confront someone. Marlowe's behavior, his flippant remarks, his convenient alibi with Dr. Vance, his nocturnal visit to the labyrinth, pointed to a man desperate to conceal a past sin. Watson nodded, his admiration undimmed. "And the scarf? That was a clever ruse." Holmes' lips twitched in a faint smile. A clumsy deception, but his panic betrayed him. The hollow in the oak, a natural hiding place known to him from his days with Margaret, was the final piece. It was a matter of connecting the threads. The door opened, and Sir Reginald entered, his face etched with grief, but tempered by gratitude. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice hoarse, "I cannot thank you enough. Clara's loss is a wound that will never heal, but knowing the truth, it brings some measure of peace. How can I repay you?" Holmes waved a hand dismissively. "Your thanks are sufficient, Sir Reginald. My work is its own reward, for it is the pursuit of truth that drives me. But I would advise you to tend to your household. Miss Beatrice, Mr. Langley, Mrs. Prescott, they will need your strength in the days ahead." Sir Reginald nodded, his eyes glistening. "You're right, Mr. Holmes. Beatrice is shattered, blaming herself for her resentment. Langley is broken, and Evelyn, she feels guilty for not stopping Clara. Even Dr. Vance is shaken, though he hides it well." Holmes' gaze sharpened. "Dr. Vance, you say? He has been a quiet presence in this affair. Tell me, Sir Reginald, how well did he know your sister, Margaret?"
Sir Reginald hesitated, then sighed. He was her physician, as I said, and a friend to the family. He was young then, just starting his practice. He was devoted to her care, though her illness was beyond his skill. Holmes nodded, filing the information away. Thank you, Sir Reginald. We shall depart this afternoon, but I leave you with this. The labyrinth's secrets are laid bare, but the heart's mysteries endure. Guard your family well. As Sir Reginald left, Watson turned to Holmes, his curiosity piqued. Holmes, you suspect Dr. Vance of something, don't you? Is there more to this case? Holmes' eyes glinted with a trace of amusement. You are perceptive, Watson, but let us not stir shadows where none remain. Vance's alibi holds, and his role in this tragedy appears peripheral. Yet his reticence suggests a man who knows more of human frailty than he admits. Perhaps in time he will reveal his own truths. For now, our work here is done. The afternoon saw Holmes and Watson preparing to leave Ashbourne Manor, their bags packed and their train awaiting. The household gathered to bid them farewell, their faces a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Beatrice, her eyes red-rimmed, clasped Watson's hand, whispering her thanks. Langley, still pale, offered a nod, unable to speak. Mrs. Prescott, tearful, pressed a small bouquet of flowers into Holmes's hands, which he accepted with a rare, gentle smile. Dr. Vance stood apart, his scholarly air intact, but his
So tangled. Holmes leaned back, his deerstalker hat tilted slightly. Life, Watson, is a labyrinth, full of twists and hidden paths. We navigate it with logic, but it is the human heart that creates its mazes. Clara sought truth, and though it cost her dearly, we have honored her by finding it. The carriage rattled on, carrying them away from Ashbourne Hollow, but Watson knew the memory of the labyrinth would linger, a testament to Holmes's genius and the fragile, tragic nature of those who walked its paths. As the train whistle sounded in the distance, Holmes closed his eyes, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, leaving the Shadowed Labyrinth behind. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The train from Ashbourne Hollow to London rattled through the Derbyshire countryside, its rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had enveloped Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson since their departure from the manor. The grim resolution of Clara Ashbourne's murder weighed on Watson's mind. The image of her body hidden in the oak's hollow, a haunting reminder of human frailty. Holmes, seated opposite, gazed out the window, his sharp profile softened by the fading light, though his eyes betrayed a restless intellect, as if the case's closure had not fully satisfied him. "Holmes," said Watson, breaking the quiet, "we've solved the mystery, brought Marlowe to justice, and given Sir Reginald some measure of peace. Yet you seem unsettled. Is there something we've missed?" Holmes turned, his grey eyes glinting with a trace of introspection. "You are perceptive, Watson. The case is resolved, yet there are threads, small, nagging threads, that remain untied. The labyrinth has yielded its primary secret, but I cannot shake the sense that its shadows hold more." Watson frowned, shifting in his seat. "You mean Dr. Vance, don't you? His reticence during the investigation, his connection to Margaret's illness, you suspect he knows something about her past, perhaps even the lover's identity." Holmes's lips curved faintly. "You read me well, my friend. Vance's role in this affair has been too passive, too carefully constructed. His alibi with Marlowe holds, but his silence speaks of a man guarding a truth. However, without evidence it is mere conjecture. For now, we must let it rest." The train's whistle sounded as it approached a small station, and Watson glanced at his notebook, filled with the meticulous details of the case. "What about Beatrice?" he asked. "Her resentment toward Clara was palpable, and her reaction to the letters suggested she knew more than she admitted. Holmes nodded, his fingers steepled. Beatrice's emotions were raw, Watson, but not murderous. Her envy of Clara stemmed from a lifetime in her cousin's shadow, not from a desire to harm her. The letters stirred guilt, perhaps for not protecting Clara.
Marlowe's, driven by fear of exposure. Watson sighed, his thoughts returning to the labyrinth. That maze, Holmes. It's more than a place. It's as if it draws out the darkest parts of those who enter it. Clara's curiosity, Marlowe's desperation. It's a cursed place in its own way. Holmes' smile was wry. Not cursed, Watson, but revealing. The labyrinth is a mirror reflecting the secrets of those who walk its paths. Clara sought truth. Marlowe sought to bury it, and we, with our logic, brought it to light. That is its power. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a telegram, delivered by a porter at the station. Holmes tore it open, his eyes scanning the brief message. "From Inspector Gregory," he said, handing it to Watson. "Marlowe has made a full confession. He confirms meeting Clara in the labyrinth to discuss the letters, which he feared would ruin his reputation. A struggle ensued, and he struck her, hiding her body in panic. He insists it was not premeditated." Watson read the telegram, his heart heavy. Poor Clara. All she wanted was to understand her mother's past. Holmes' gaze was distant. And in doing so, she uncovered a truth too dangerous to bear. The human heart, Watson, is a labyrinth in itself, complex, deceptive, and often tragic. Back in London, the familiar chaos of Baker Street welcomed them, the cluttered rooms a stark contrast to the sombre order of Ashbourne Manor. Mrs. Hudson, ever attentive, had a fire blazing and tea ready, sensing their need for comfort. As Watson unpacked, Holmes stood by the mantelpiece, his pipe relit, his thoughts still lingering on the case. "Watson," he said at length, "this affair reminds us of the delicate balance between truth and consequence. Clara's pursuit of her mother's secret was noble, yet it led to her demise. Marlowe's cowardice was his undoing, yet he was not a villain in the traditional sense. Life is rarely so simple." Watson nodded, setting aside his notebook. "You've given the Ashbournes closure, Holmes, but at a cost. Will they ever recover?" Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes fixed on the fire. "Recovery is a slow path, Watson, but truth is the first step. Sir Reginald will mourn, Beatrice will grapple with her guilt, and Langley will carry his grief. Yet they have the clarity we have provided. It is all we can offer." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Mrs. Hudson entered with a letter bearing the Ashbourne crest. "Delivered just now, Mr. Holmes," she said, handing it to him. Holmes opened it, his eyes scanning the elegant script. Head. "None, but I suspect he will carry his secrets to his grave. Some truths, Watson, are better left buried." As night fell over Baker Street, Holmes took up his violin, the plaintive notes filling the room. Watson listened, his thoughts drifting back to the labyrinth, its dark paths, its hidden hollow, its silent witness to human folly. The case was closed, but its echoes lingered, a testament to Holmes' genius and the fragile, tangled hearts he sought to understand. Holmes paused, lowering his bow. "Watson," he said softly, "the world is a puzzle, and we are its solvers, but even we cannot unravel every mystery of the soul." Watson nodded, the fire's glow casting long shadows. "Perhaps not, Holmes,
but you come closer than anyone." Holmes's smile was fleeting, and he resumed playing. The music a quiet elegy for Clara Ashbourne and the labyrinth that had claimed her. The case was over, but its lessons would endure, etched into the chronicles of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 13. The Unseen Threads. The familiar hum of Baker Street had resumed its comforting rhythm, yet the echoes of the Ashbourne affair lingered in the air of 221B like a faint, unresolved chord. Sherlock Holmes, seated by the fire, his violin resting on his knee, seemed unusually pensive, his sharp eyes fixed on the flickering flames. Dr. Watson, sorting through his notes on the case, felt the weight of its conclusion. A murderer unmasked, a family's grief laid bare, but sensed that Holmes was not entirely at peace. The labyrinth's secrets had been unraveled, but something in his friend's demeanor suggested there were threads yet to be tied. "Holmes," said Watson, setting aside his pen, "you've solved the case, brought justice to Clara's memory, and left Ashbourne Manor with answers. Yet you seem restless. Is there more to this affair than Marlowe's confession?" Holmes's gaze shifted to Watson, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You know me too well, Watson. The case is closed, Marlowe's guilt established, but there are subtleties, small, nagging inconsistencies that linger in my mind. The labyrinth has spoken, but its whispers are not yet silent." Watson leaned forward, intrigued. Inconsistencies, such as Dr. Vance's reticence, or something else? Holmes rose, pacing slowly, his pipe in hand, though unlit. "Dr. Vance is a piece of the puzzle, Watson, but not the only one. His silence about Margaret Ashbourne's past suggests knowledge he did not share, yet his alibi holds firm. No, it is the broader tapestry of the case, the dynamics of the household, the weight of secrets carried across generations. I suspect—" his eyes narrowing. The letters, Watson, spoke of a betrayal, but their tone suggested more than a lover's quarrel. Margaret's illness, her sudden death, the whispers of a scandal. There is a shadow here, a connection to the present that eludes me. I've wired Sir Reginald with a request for further details about Margaret's final days. His response may shed light. A knock at the door interrupted them, and Mrs. Hudson entered with a fresh telegram. Holmes tore it open, his eyes scanning the brief message. "From Sir Reginald," he said, handing it to Watson. "He confirms that Margaret's death was attributed to a fever, but he recalls Dr. Vance's particular distress at the time, as if he blamed himself. There's also mention of a family heirloom, a sapphire ring, missing since Margaret's death, never recovered." Watson's brow furrowed. A ring? Could it be tied to the locket? Another keepsake from her lover? Holmes nodded, his mind clearly racing. Possibly. The locket was a gift from Marlowe, but a ring suggests a deeper commitment, perhaps one he could not honor. If Clara found it, or suspected its existence, it may have fueled her confrontation with Marlowe. But why was it never found? And why does Vance's shadow loom over this? Holmes returned to his chair, lighting his pipe at last. "Watson, consider this. Margaret's lover, Marlowe, abandoned her. But her death was sudden, unexpected for a woman of her age. Dr. Vance, her physician, was young, inexperienced. Suppose his treatment failed her, or worse, suppose he knew of the affair and kept silent to protect the family's honor. Clara's discovery of the letters may have stirred questions not only about Marlowe, but about her mother's death itself." Watson's eyes widened. "You're suggesting Vance might have been negligent or even complicit in some way, but how does that connect to Clara's murder?" Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke. "It may not connect directly, Watson, but it explains Vance's reticence. If Clara suspected foul play in her mother's death, her inquiries could have threatened Vance's reputation, perhaps even his practice. Marlowe, however, was the immediate danger.
his panic over exposure leading to her death. Yet Vance's silence is a piece that does not fit neatly. The evening passed in quiet reflection, Holmes alternating between his violin and his pipe, his mind weaving through the case's intricacies. Watson, poring over his notes, marveled at his friend's ability to see beyond the obvious, to chase shadows where others saw only light. The next morning brought a visitor to Baker Street. Inspector Gregory, his face weary but respectful. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, removing his hat. "I've come with news from Ashbourne Hollow. Marlowe's trial is set, and his confession holds. But there's something else. Dr. Vance has left the village, suddenly, claiming a need to visit a colleague in
Edinburgh. Sir Reginald thought you should know." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, Inspector. A sudden departure, just as the case closes. Most interesting. Did he leave a forwarding address?" Gregory shook his head. "None, sir. He packed light and left yesterday. The villagers are talking, saying he seemed agitated." Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Agitated, yet silent. Thank you, Inspector. Keep us informed if he resurfaces." As Gregory left, Watson turned to Holmes. "Vance's departure. It's suspicious, isn't it? You think he's running from something?" Holmes's smile was enigmatic. "Running, Watson, or retreating to regroup. Without evidence, we cannot pursue him. But his actions suggest a man with a burden. For now, we must let him go. The labyrinth's primary secret is solved, and Clara's justice is secured." Watson nodded, though his heart remained heavy. "And the ring? The missing heirloom?" Holmes's gaze returned to the fire. "A thread left dangling, Watson. Perhaps it lies buried in the labyrinth, or perhaps it has lost to time. Some mysteries remain, even for me." The day closed with Holmes taking up his violin once more, the notes mournful yet resolute. Watson, listening, felt the weight of the case settle into memory, its lessons of love, betrayal, and truth etched into his chronicles. The labyrinth of Ashbourne Manor had yielded its darkest secret, but its echoes would linger, a testament to the complexity of the human heart and the brilliance of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 14. The Lingering Shadows. The familiar clutter of 221B Baker Street, with its chemical apparatus, scattered papers, and the faint aroma of tobacco, offered a stark contrast to the oppressive grandeur of Ashbourne Manor. Yet, as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson settled back into their London routine, the shadow of the labyrinth lingered, its unresolved threads tugging at the edges of their thoughts. Holmes, reclining in his armchair, his violin silent for once, stared into the fire, his sharp features etched with a rare introspective calm. Watson, at his writing desk, penned the final details of the Ashbourne affair, but his mind was restless, haunted by the case's lingering mysteries. "Holmes," said Watson, setting down his pen, "we've closed the case, brought Marlowe to justice, and given the Ashbournes some semblance of closure. Yet you're brooding. Is it Dr. Vance's sudden departure, or that missing sapphire ring?" Holmes's grey eyes flicked toward Watson, a faint smile softening his angular face. "You grow ever more astute, Watson. The case is resolved, Clara's murder solved, but the tapestry is not complete. Dr. Vance's flight to Edinburgh
Was more involved than he let on, don't you? His silence about Margaret's past, his quick exit after Marlowe's arrest, it's too convenient." Holmes nodded, reaching for his pipe. "Precisely, Watson. Vance's reticence suggests a man guarding a secret, not of murder, but of complicity. Margaret's death, attributed to a fever, was too sudden for a woman of her vitality. As her physician, Vance may have failed her, or worse, concealed a truth to protect the family's honor.
Clara's discovery of the letters and locket may have stirred questions about her mother's demise, questions that unsettled Vance. Watson's eyes widened. You think Clara suspected foul play in her mother's death? That she confronted Vance as well as Marlowe? Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward like a question. It is a possibility, Watson. The letters spoke of betrayal, not only of love, but perhaps of trust. If Clara believed Vance's negligence or silence contributed to her mother's death, her inquiries could have threatened his reputation. Marlowe, however, was the immediate danger, his panic over exposure leading to her murder. But Vance's departure suggests a man unwilling to face further scrutiny. The Morning Post brought a letter from Sir Reginald, its Ashbourne crest a reminder of the manor's somber halls. Holmes opened it, his eyes scanning the elegant script. Sir Reginald writes of the household state, he said, passing the letter to Watson. Beatrice has begun transforming the labyrinth into a memorial garden for Clara. A touching gesture. Langley remains in mourning, planning to leave for London. Mrs. Prescott is frail, consumed by guilt for not stopping Clara's inquiries. And Vance. Sir Reginald confirms he has not returned, his practice left in the hands of a colleague. Watson read the letter, his heart heavy. Poor Beatrice, trying to find redemption in that cursed maze. And Vance, his absence speaks volumes, Holmes. Do you think he'll ever return? Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke. If he is wise, he will not. But men with secrets are rarely wise. I have instructed Inspector Gregory to monitor his movements. Should Vance resurface, we may yet learn what he conceals. Watson returned to his notes, his mind turning to the sapphire ring. And the ring, Holmes? Sir Reginald mentioned it was missing since Margaret's death. Could it be tied to the locket? Another token from Marlowe. Holmes's gaze grew distant. The ring is a shadow, Watson, a piece of the puzzle we cannot yet place. Its absence suggests it was taken, perhaps by Marlowe, perhaps by another. If it lies in the labyrinth, it is buried deep. If it is elsewhere, it may hold the key to Vance's silence. For now, respectful nod. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, he said, Sir Reginald sent me with this, a token of his gratitude. He also asked me to convey a message. He has searched the manor for the sapphire ring but found nothing. He fears it was lost forever with Margaret. Holmes unwrapped the parcel, revealing a silver cigarette case engraved with his initials. A thoughtful gesture, he said, setting it aside. And the ring. Did Sir Reginald mention any suspicions about its disappearance? Harrowby hesitated. He spoke of Margaret's final days, how she clung to the ring as a keepsake. Dr. Vance was with her often, tending her illness. Sir Reginald wonders if she gave it to him, though he has no proof. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Most interesting. Thank you, Mr. Harrowby. Please convey my regards to Sir Reginald. As the solicitor left, Watson turned to Holmes. Vance again, Holmes. Could he have taken the ring, perhaps as a memento or to cover some guilt? Holmes leaned back, his pipe glowing. It is a tantalizing thought, Watson. The ring, like the locket, may symbolize a promise or a betrayal. If Vance possesses it, it could explain his flight. But without evidence, we are chasing shadows. That evening, Holmes took up his violin, the notes slow and mournful, a requiem for Clara and the secrets of Ashbourne Manor. Watson listened, his thoughts drifting to the labyrinth, its dark paths, its hidden hollow, its silent witness to human tragedy. Holmes, he said, this case, it's shown us how the past can haunt the present.
Clara's curiosity, Margaret's secrets, Marlowe's cowardice, Vance's silence. They're all part of the same maze. Holmes lowered his bow, his eyes fixed on the fire. Indeed, Watson, the labyrinth is not merely a place, but a state of mind, where truths are buried and unearthed at great cost. We have brought light to its shadows, but some corners remain dark. That is the nature of our work. As the fire crackled, Watson felt the weight of the case settle into his chronicles, a tale of love, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The labyrinth's echoes would fade, but its lessons would endure, a testament to Holmes's genius and the fragile, tangled hearts he sought to unravel. Chapter 15. The Labyrinth's Final Whisper. The fog of London wrapped 221B Baker Street in a grey embrace, its tendrils curling around the gas lamps as evening settled over the city. Within the familiar chaos of their rooms, Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his long fingers steepled, his sharp eyes fixed on the dancer.
Holmes's triumph, though his heart remained heavy with its cost. "Holmes," said Watson, his voice tinged with fatigue, "we've brought justice to Clara Ashbourne, exposed Marlowe's crime, and given Sir Reginald the truth he sought. Yet I sense you're not fully at ease. Is it Vance, the ring, or something deeper?" Holmes's gaze shifted to Watson, a rare softness in his expression. "You read me well, my dear Watson. The case is closed, Marlowe's guilt proven, and the labyrinth's primary secret laid bare. Yet like a melody with a discordant note, there remains an unresolved chord. Dr. Vance's flight and the missing ring suggest a secondary truth, one that does not alter Clara's fate, but speaks to the human frailties we encountered." Watson leaned forward, his curiosity undimmed. "You believe Vance was involved in Margaret's death, don't you? Not as a murderer, perhaps, but as a man who failed her, or hid something to protect himself." Holmes nodded, reaching for his pipe. "Precisely, Watson. Margaret Ashbourne's death, attributed to a fever, was too sudden, too convenient. Vance, as a physician, was young, inexperienced. If his treatment was inadequate, or if he concealed a truth, perhaps knowledge of her affair with Marlowe to spare the family scandal, it would explain his reticence. Clara's discovery of the letters and locket may have stirred questions about her mother's demise, questions Vance could not face." Watson frowned, recalling the solicitor's visit. "And the sapphire ring. Sir Reginald said Margaret cherished it. If Vance took it, could it be evidence of his guilt?" Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes distant. "The ring is a phantom, Watson, a symbol of a promise or betrayal. If Vance possesses it, it may represent his remorse or his attempt to erase a past mistake. Without it, we have only speculation. I've instructed Inspector Gregory to alert us if Vance resurfaces, but for now, we must let the matter rest." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Mrs. Hudson entered with a small package, its wrapping bearing the Ashbourne crest. "A delivery, Mr. Holmes," she said, placing it on the table. "From Miss Beatrice Ashbourne." Holmes opened the package, revealing a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with elegant handwriting. A note was tucked inside, which he read aloud. "Dear Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson, I send you Clara's journal, found among her things. It speaks of her love for the labyrinth and her search for her mother's truth. I hope it brings you some measure of the peace it has given me. The memorial garden progresses, and we honor Clara's memory. With eternal gratitude, Beatrice Ashbourne." Holmes handed the journal to Watson, who opened it carefully. The entries were vivid, filled with Clara's musings on the labyrinth's history, her mother's love for its paths, and her discovery of
Mother's locket in the maze, under the oak. It holds a secret, I'm sure. A name? A promise?
Tomorrow, I shall ask Mrs. Prescott, and perhaps Dr. Vance. The truth is close. Watson's heart sank. She was so close to the truth, Holmes. If only she hadn't confronted Marlowe alone. Holmes' expression was somber. Her courage was her undoing, Watson. The labyrinth drew her in, as it did her mother, and its secrets proved fatal. Yet Beatrice's gesture, this journal, shows a family striving to heal. The memorial garden will transform the maze from a place of tragedy to one of remembrance. Watson closed the journal, his thoughts drifting to Ashbourne Hollow. And Vance? Will we ever know his part in this? Holmes's smile was enigmatic. Some truths, Watson, remain in shadow. Vance's departure suggests a man burdened by conscience, but without evidence, we cannot pursue him. The ring, if it exists, may surface in time, or it may lie buried in the labyrinth's earth, a silent witness to Margaret's story. As night deepened, Holmes took up his violin, the notes slow and elegiac, a fitting coda to the Ashbourne affair. Watson listened, his mind filled with images of the labyrinth, its dark hedges, its hidden hollow, its silent judgment. The case had been a journey through human hearts, each turn revealing love, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of truth. "Holmes," said Watson, as the music paused. "This case, it's shown us the cost of secrets, the weight of the past. You've brought light to the darkness, but at what price to those left behind?" Holmes lowered his bow, his eyes fixed on the fire. "The price of truth, Watson, is often pain, but it is a price worth paying. We have given Clara's memory justice, and the Ashbournes a path to healing. Our work is to unravel the labyrinth of the human soul, and though we cannot mend its wounds, we can illuminate its paths." The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room, and Watson felt the case settle into his chronicles, a tale of mystery and mourning, of a labyrinth that held both death and redemption. As Holmes resumed his playing, the notes rose like a prayer, carrying the echoes of Ashbourne Manor into the London night, where they would linger, a testament to the enduring genius of Sherlock Holmes.